Hey, Redeeming Life Church, Pastor Brian here, and this is Redeeming Life Live. We're getting started. Hopefully you're with us. I think we're on time. I think everything's in sync. I got all the software going. My kids might be sucking up some bandwidth. I've pressed on them not to, but you know how kids are. Anyway, here's what we're going to do tonight. We're going to talk about the Bible. We're going to talk about theology. I'm going to try to answer your questions in any way I can. And we're going to take this opportunity, this space where you're sitting in front of your screen and I'm sitting in front of a camera, staring kind of awkwardly at it and feeling weird, to hopefully just have some conversation and some communication. This is not a substitute for getting in the room or around the table or at a coffee shop with somebody in real life. We've really gotten excited about internet discipleship, and we just go here and we kind of put an image of ourselves forward, and it's kind of edited, and you don't get to see the nuances of life on life. Those are buzzy words, I get it, but this is not a substitute for that. So at Redeeming Life, first of all, I want to invite you to join us on Sunday mornings at 11 a.m. We gather the whole church family, and we take that Christian family seriously. We gather together, and we want it to be like family. We want it to be a practice for what heaven might look like. And we do that at 11 a.m. I'm going to double check and make sure that these texts that are coming in are not telling me the audio is not working or something. All right, cool. It looks like we're good, and I'm going to get to some. Well, we already have a good number of questions and things. I've already written some down. So anyway, the point is we gather, and it's important that you're gathering not on your phone, not through all the technology stuff. We gather because the Bible shows how we sharpen one another, and we grow one another, and we have life with one another, and it is practice for eternity when we're worshiping God together as a family. And so this week I heard Pastor Brett say, church life is like, being arm in arm with one another and heading towards Jesus in the goods and the bads and in the community that's really lacking in a world that is streaming all the time, right? So this is not the substitute for that. However, if you can't join us, or there's something going on, you're spying on us, which is fine, or you just want to ask questions, this is an alternative. We want to leverage technology for the best that we can and be communicating into the marketplace. I think if the Apostle Paul had this kind of technology, who knows what would have happened. So that's what we're going to do tonight. Here's how it's going to work. I have a cell phone here that does not have anybody's phone numbers or addresses in it. It is set up for our prayer stuff. You can text in prayer requests, this same number, for this sort of thing. Unless you tell me who you are, I'm not going to know who's tuning in. So some of you guys have chimed in. Looks like Pastor Brett is in the mix, and the Walkers are tuning in. And these are just the folks who've told me. I don't have to. If you don't give me your name, you don't want me to say anything, I won't. And I think this last one here, and these are the guys who are good to let me share. And then I have a few others. There we go. My phone is kind of acting up here. And then Ed has chimed in, and he's got a he's reminded me of something I totally forgot about on Sunday. I'll read through this in just a second. I'll get back to these in just a moment. So what's going to happen is if you want to text in and you want to be a part of the conversation, if you have a question, a comment, just something going on, the number is, I am not a weatherman, over here. There we go. Check it out. The number is like over here somewhere. 385-368-6665 gets you to this phone. So if you can text in and ask questions, you are welcome to do that. And it can remain anonymous, or you can share who you are, whatever. At the end, I'm going to delete all that stuff, and that'll be the end of it. I'm not going to look you up. I'm not going to try to figure out who you are. We're just going to let it be. So that's what that is. Now, what we're going to do tonight is we're going to work through some things from 1 Corinthians 7 and maybe a little bit of overflow from 6 from before. We're going to look into some questions that people have had. We're going to start, though, with the text that's echoing or mirroring or following along the sermon from Redeeming Life. So we're talking about some of the groups and fellowship groups, and we have groups that are meeting. We have a group that's meeting in Foxborough. We have another group that is meeting at Mestizos on Thursday night, and they're going through the 20 basic things every Christian should, like good theological, just let's walk through this and journey through this. We have a young adults group that's meeting Wednesday nights. We have youth. If you have a junior high through high school age kid, you can send me a text, let me know, we'll get you the info. That group is meeting. We have the potential of a couple other startup groups. We have some things. We want to be getting together in community. So a lot of those folks are sitting and they're talking about the sermon. They're talking about things I said that were goofy. They're asking questions. They're opening up their study Bibles and their texts, and they're just working it out together. And so this is an opportunity. We're going to do a little bit of that, and then we're going to transition into some overarching theology, if that's where we go, and then really any question is fair game. And at this point, I'll just say, if you have any questions at all you want to ask on anything, go ahead and send them in. I've already started. I don't think you can see this from where you're at, but for my own benefit, to keep me organized, I've written down all the questions that were on my phone when I came in to start. Somebody asked me about Right Now Media because we posted some stuff on Facebook or said something on Sunday. Some of these questions have come to my other phone as well, just simply because people know me. That's fine too, but for tonight, I'm probably not going to see that if you do that. Somebody asked me about some word stuff, so we're going to talk about the Net Translation Bible and how that can be a helpful tool. I have a question here that says, how do we know what God's ways are? How do we know if what we do pleases God? And that's just something that kind of came out of the sermon. This one is from some other folks. It says, why do you stay in Salt Lake? We'll get to that. What does testing mean in Romans 12:2? Was something I dealt with that a little bit. I haven't looked at it too much, but we're going to talk about those things plus anything else you have. I'm going to take a moment. If you want to grab your Bible, start looking at 1 Corinthians chapter 7. Oh, by the way, Herschel's chiming in. Hey, buddy, it's good to have you. If you want to jump in, at least start kind of skimming that. If you have questions, things from the sermon we didn't cover, which is probably plenty, go ahead and fire away. I'm going to really quickly look and see what else we've got here by way of questions. Okay, this is helpful. It's really good. Hey, by the way, it's so much better for me when you guys are sending questions. I don't always have the answers right away, but it's better than me up here like a dancing chicken trying to cover the time. Okay, good stuff. All right, I'm going to start with, I'm going to knock out just a couple of really things here real quick, and then we're going to jump into 1 Corinthians. First, Right Now Media. What is it? We talk about it a lot. How do you get involved with it? So Right Now Media is like, I've heard some people call it the Netflix for Christians, or maybe the Netflix for Christian Bible study, or basically they have 14,000 plus different studies and courses of study that that people can just go through. So you have Francis Chan going through James, and you have conference speakers, and you have, if some of it you can find, some of it you can't. Some of it's exclusive to Right Now Media. They've collected all this stuff in one place on an app. You can use it on your computer. I use it on the Roku on my TV, and you go and you just scroll through things on every topic: Bible study, needs issues, marriage, money management, teens, parenting, counseling things. It's got tons and tons of kids' cartoons. So we have purchased a subscription, and we will purchase one for you. We will give that to you if you're associated with us in some way. If you're watching this, if you would like a Right Now Media account, we can send you an invitation to that. If you are interested in that, you're going to have to send me your email. You can do it on this phone. You can talk with us at church, whatever the case may be. Kind of let me know the situation, and we will send you an invitation, and we'll pay for your subscription as long as we're doing that. It's good for discipleship. It's just great. There's a drive-through history that's really entertaining. There's historical studies. There's just all kinds of good stuff. So that's what Right Now Media is. And somebody had asked because I think we had made mention of it somewhere in the social media circle. So we've covered that one. Another question. A couple more questions are coming in. Okay, why would God allow a pastor's in quotes here, to hurt somebody? I'm going to write that down, and we're going to move to that a little bit later. Okay, I'm going to just deal with this Net Translation one, and then we're going to get into the 1 Corinthians text for a minute. So I had I love the I love looking at the biblical language stuff. That's just personal. I like it. It's helpful. So, like, people ask questions. One of these questions, and this is kind of what prompted a little bit of this, hey, let me go check out how this looks in the original languages. That is not to say at all that, if you go pick up a good Bible, good translation, we look at the ESV, we preach from that, A Redeeming Life. That doesn't mean it's the best translation in the world. I have a variety of translations, the NASB, the Holman, there's all kinds of Bible translations out there. But if you really, and so you can trust those Bible translations. If you have these kinds of questions and you don't own a study Bible, get the Holman Study Bible or the ESV Study Bible. This is a giant monster, and I keep pressing that this will help with some of these things. If you're reading and there's kind of some key things that might be helpful, they put notes down in the bottom. Let me see if I can show you one of these. So here's a page out of Ecclesiastes. So I'm going to try to hold it up here to the camera the best I can so you can kind of get a general idea. It's probably copyrighted material. I'm probably violating something. So all these little pieces down at the bottom, down by where my fingers are, those are just notes and helping tools. That's not inspired by God, but every book has some scholar that has studied that and knows that and wrote huge commentaries like these books behind me, and they just put the key, like this is going to be really helpful. There's also maps and charts and all sorts of things. So you have a translation that's pretty decent. I'm not going to say every translation has a different purpose. So this translation might not be the best for the purpose you're looking for, but if you're looking to study, this is good material, and it's a good study Bible, ESV Study Bible. I share that just so the stuff that I'm sharing, if it's intimidating, just get an ESV Study Bible or a Holman Study Bible or whatever else is out there that's good. It's been put together by lots of scholars, lots of people who spend their lives in each book. If it's just done by one person, well, you're only going to get one person's view. If you get something that's been edited by lots of people and has a committee, that's going to be good. Okay, so moving on to the Net Bible. The New English Translation Bible. I think you can see this for free on Bible.org if you are interested. I think they've made this and the notes available. This one, and I think the newer edition, this is the first edition, and the next edition has even more, but this edition has 60,302 notes by the translators and editors, and most of those are translation notes in the text. And so if you're wondering about things where you're reading in one translation and then you're reading in another translation, you can look at the notes that says, hey, there's something going on here. This isn't really in one of the early manuscripts. This word, one of my favorites is I can't remember the word off the top of my head. My vocab is failing me. Splachna. I think it's splachna in the Greek. I hope that's right. For those of you who know, and I'm going to start getting texts that I have that wrong. I think it's splachna. Is like the epicenter of emotion, right? So we would say in English, my heart. All right, I have a heart for this, or I love you with all of my heart. Well, there were some differences in their time, and so they thought that came from the guts somewhere. And honestly, a lot of them thought that your ideas and your thoughts came from your heart, and your emotions came from your kidneys or your bowels. And so splachna is like guts, kidneys. And so a lot of what's in the net is very literal with notes. Or if they didn't do it super literal, they go down. It's not word for word. Word for word is really convoluted. You need to get it interlinear. It's like Yoda speak. It's almost impossible to do a perfect word for word because the languages are a little different. It's neither here nor there. But if you're really interested, because I've had people asking me based on what we've been doing here, the Net Bible is a translation with all these little notes. In fact, let's just see if we could. I should have just found one before I started with the splachna stuff. But it's just a really helpful way to understand kind of where some of the language differences are. You don't need to read Greek or Hebrew. It would be helpful if they're pointing to something in a lexicon or they're showing you some other things, but it's certainly not necessary. So that was one of the other questions. I think I've answered that one. I'm going to move on. Especially since I now have more questions coming in that I'm going to want to get to here. Okay, this is also good. I'm going to leave that in the text to see if I can remember it because we're going to head to the stuff. Okay, Net Bible, Right Now Media. Let's move into 1 Corinthians chapter 7. I just got another question there about that. I have two things that have already come in, and I'm just going to start with those. Just for an overview, if you didn't listen to the sermon or anything, chapter 7 of the letter to the Corinthians, the first one, is really about the various relationship parameters that we have with divorce, with singleness, with your status of where you've been called. And then we also see this little piece in the middle where Jesus is saying he's bought all of you. You're a bondservant to Christ, and so live in that regard for Christ, kind of as you were called. And then when can you get remarried? I'm not going to get into all the specifics. I'm going to start answering the questions. You can listen to the sermon or specifically just read through it. It's kind of a laundry list of some rules. The first thing, and this one Ed reminded me, I missed something in my sermon that I had in my manuscript, and that is there is a verse, I'm pretty sure you even told me if I look back in the notes, I think it's in 29. 26 has one little note. So Paul's writing all these things about marriage, and he says, I think that in view of the present distress, it is good for a person to remain as he is. My point being, there's a present distress, an issue that Paul's speaking into, and then I think Ed mentioned, so in 29 it says, this is what I mean, brothers, the appointed time has grown very short. From now on, let those who live in this way, So what's happening is there's a hinting of something to come, and it could be lots of things. Ed had, suggested, is it the destruction of the temple in 70 A.D., which that was coming maybe? Was it the persecution that was coming? Paul is speaking in a way that tends not to feel like it's in line with the rest of the Bible if you remove this text from its context. Why would we have to function in a certain way because there's a coming disaster or an impending distress? Why would we live that way? When the Bible, it says, hey, like the family unit is good. If we take the principles from Genesis to live in family and be one flesh and repopulate the earth, if nobody got married, this would be an interesting dynamic, wouldn't it? So why would Paul be able to say, hey, because of the pending things that are coming, maybe take your focus down a notch from getting married. Maybe it's okay to be single because, as he even says, you'll have more responsibility when you have another person, and if you're running for your lives, this is going to be a challenge. He is pointing out there is something coming. We have other places. I can't remember off the top of my head. If you Googled it, you could probably find it, but there's a sense where you pray for your leaders. Somewhere in the epistles, I'm drawing a blank right now. If you pray for your leaders, it's important that you do that so that we can live quiet, peaceable lives. That's what the disciples should be doing. That's what the Christians should be doing. Praying for your leaders so that we can live in peace and harmony. And that'd be a good time to get married and have these responsibilities and the family focusing on the Lord. But in the coming potential problems, maybe it's better to think differently. So what that means is if that's the case, there are going to be circumstances outside of your relationship or your marriage or those things that are going to be influencing the way you approach God, and the primary purpose, the primary impetus behind his statement is that you're not distracted from Jesus. So if your marriage is going to really, he already says that you're going to be kind of distracted. But then in other places, you're going to be the pastor or the leader in your home. Ephesians 5, you're going to draw your spouse. You're going to love her men like Christ loves the church. You have all these instructions in other times, but in this time, it's maybe a coming problem that's going to be impossible or so difficult. And so, if you're single, be thankful in that moment or whatever. I don't even know. I should probably read the rest of what you said, Ed. I don't know if that even touched on it, but I know that's something that I didn't get to is those texts. And then he does point out, and this actually came up on the city too. He does point out when the temple was destroyed in 70 AD, that was the end of the sacrifices and ultimately the Jewish system of worship as they knew it. The temple has not been rebuilt, and they're still living in those conditions. And I look at that as a Christian and say that's because Christ has fulfilled that, and there is no longer a necessity for that temple. He dwells in us as a living temple. Together, we're all living stones in this temple in which he dwells. And so, Paul, maybe that's part of this piece, but in any way, the point, I think, the timeless principle point is that there are conditions in which marriage might be impacted or affected by outside circumstances. And so marriage is not the end-all, be-all. and we shouldn't treat it as such, but it is a way, a gift to help us through this life as we journey into eternity. And having another with us shows us the gospel and sanctifies us and grows us and teaches us many things, so that on the other side of this, when we're all brothers and sisters worshiping the Lord, those of us who've confess faith in Christ and have been purchased by His blood and we're bondservants, that we have gotten there. And so I'll just say that means that we're not going to be focused on those marriages and those families, because we're focused on our relationship with Christ. We're worshiping God. Okay. Anyway, I hope that got to it. I don't know, but if so, Ed, I hope that was helpful. Here's the other one that comes out of 1 Corinthians. Okay, so it says, my spouse was physically and emotionally abusive in our relationship. Was I wrong in divorcing my spouse, since abuse is not one of the reasons listed in 1 Corinthians 7? Divorce is a tricky business, and here's what we tend to do as people. We look for the loopholes and the outs. And I'm not trying to say that's what you're doing, but we say, oh, look, Jesus talks about in the case of infidelity, where someone has gone outside the marriage, then it's okay to get divorced. We look for the reasons why it's okay to get divorced, rather than looking for the reasons why we should stay together or seek the gospel in an abusive relationship. That's not good. There's sin involved. The reality is, divorce is a picture of the same thing that happens with us and God. Sin is involved. The relationship is shattered and broken. Now, between two humans, it's kind of a lateral deal, but between us and God, it's a vertical deal. But divorce is a picture of that. And so the idea is, marriage is supposed to be a picture of the gospel and reconciliation and unity and community and obedience to God. It sounds like in this case you have sin involved. And when sin is involved, divorce is the last link, or maybe one of the links towards the end of a long chain of sin. And so in these questions of what was okay and what wasn't okay, the answer is, what did Christ die for? Now, a lot of people disagree with me on this, but I'm going to take this stand, I guess. If we say that you are not going to be okay with God and not forgiven because you got a divorce, we are saying that divorce has more power than what Jesus did on the cross. Now, there may be some consequences to your divorce, for sure. Just because you're forgiven by Christ and His blood is covering you doesn't mean that some of those consequences might not come into play. There might be things where, look, you're going to have child support and responsibilities, and churches might say, hey, we have some views on this, that maybe you are or you aren't going to be a pastor. I take the position, first and foremost, that okay or not okay has everything to do with Jesus, and that's the same for every other sin. And so rather than saying, well, what are the loopholes that get me out of this, in which I don't need to think about Jesus or His gospel or His work on the cross, instead we should be saying, in what ways does Christ's blood cover this? In what ways did whatever my involvement in the sin was and this person's involvement in the sin was nail Jesus to the cross? The sin that holds Him there, that He's being crushed under. That's probably the better way to look at this. And then as we do that, then the question becomes, now what? What does it mean as I'm coming to God? And a lot of people struggle to forgive themselves. And if God will forgive you, if His word says, look, if you have asked for His forgiveness, and if you have submitted yourself to Christ in that, and you've basically laid that at the foot of the cross and said, look, I'm sorry, and you're turning from those ways, God's faithful and He'll forgive you. Now, where it gets really tricky is when you see people in these habitual... I heard of a story of a person who has been remarried like 5 times, divorced in a short period of time. And you look at that and go, were you really remorseful? Did you even really care that your sin did that? You're like, that's just cheap grace, and that's going to be tough when you stand before God and you say, oh, I thought that was good. I took advantage of your grace and I just kept sinning. Paul says, should we keep on doing that so that grace abounds? By no means. And so if your behavior is really, truly a sense of conviction, and you're feeling the weight of that, then you're going to turn away from that kind of behavior. And then the question is, well, what about remarriage? Can I marry somebody who's been divorced? And can I remarry if I've been divorced? And what are the parameters if there was, this condition, a non-believing person and a believing person, the non-believing person leaves, or there was infidelity, or, let's do this. I'm going to recommend... Here's a 3 Views book. I like these books. There's normally called 4 Views. Sometimes they're called 5 or 6 Views. But it's the Counterpoint series. You can still find a lot of these on Amazon. Looks like, let's see here. I don't know. Looks like that. It's called Remarriage After Divorce. Remarriage After Divorce in Today's Church. 3 views. And here's how you read these. This is kind of the tricky part about this. What you get is this one has 3. A lot of them have 4. You get an essay from a particular position. Let's see what the positions are called. And they all have like, so position number 1 is no remarriage after divorce. Position number 2 is remarriage for adultery or desertion. Position number 3 is remarriage for adultery, desertion, or abuse. And they make their arguments and they make their cases, and then they each lay out a case, and then the next person, the other 2 people in this case, come along and they write a short rebuttal. So what you want to do is you want to start from the position you think is your position. Start reading and go, let me see what I think. Don't read the rebuttals yet. Then read the other positions. Look at the scriptures they're talking about. Think about it. Then go back and see how the rebuttals work. I'll show you a different book. I think this might be the one that started it all, but I don't remember. This one's great. I absolutely love this book. So this is our Miraculous Gifts for Today, 4 views. Sam Storms, Douglas Oss, Gaffin, Grudem's the editor. Anyway, same kind of thing. You have these different positions. You know, you have a cessationist position. Always the gifts aren't going. The open but cautious, third wave, Pentecostal charismatic. You read your position, the one you think you're closest to, and you just keep working your way out till you've read all the essays and the divorce one or the others. Then you read the rebuttals. Then you need to go to the text, and you need to work on this biblically and come to your convictions as the Holy Spirit's going to lead you. I'm just going to suggest that if we look for the loopholes, we're not really understanding the gospel well. If we look to the gospel, if we look to the cross to say, where does reconciliation and redemption come in when we see Christ in the middle of it, we'll probably come to better answers. I don't know how helpful that was, but I hope it was helpful. I got somebody else chiming in. Oh, see, Herschel's with me. He loves the Counterpoint series. They got tons of these. They're great. I got a bunch of them. I love them. This is a total rabbit trail, but it's funny. My wife was reading, and I won't say which one it was, but we go through these once in a while. And a while back, she was reading this, and she's like, wow, I think I'm position A. And I'm thinking, that's weird. Huh, okay. And great, she's totally solid in this. And then she goes and she reads the next position. She goes, wait a minute. Honey, are you sure we're not position B? And I'm like, keep reading. Pretty soon she's convinced that we're position C. And then she thinks maybe we're probably position D. Then she goes back and starts reading the rebuttals. And then she thinks we're maybe A, or maybe AB, or C, or... She's like, how do you even do this? This is crazy. They really, if you want to look at a topic, they give you the good overview of the topic. And they give you the buzzwords in the topic, and they give you the scriptures that are part of the debate, and a lot of times they're using the same scriptures. Sometimes they're not, so just go to those and work in them. But in any case, when you're looking at divorce, that's a resource. There's many others. Look to the cross. Look to the gospel, because divorce is not more powerful than Jesus and his work on the cross and his death and his burial and his resurrection. It's just not. And so we need to get our head around what that means. There might be, like I said, some consequences, but we need to really see that for what it is. That was one of the questions. So I think I've dealt with a couple there. Okay, so now, in light of this sermon, and frankly the previous week's sermon, which had to do with adultery, pornography, lust, it just had to do with just the sexual immorality issues before we got to some of these marriage parameters. And for most of you, you're going to be probably really happy. We're moving to a whole new topic next week when we get into 8 and 9. We're going to look at food sacrificed to idols, and Paul getting paid. Does a pastor who's preaching the gospel get paid or not paid, or what's Paul doing with that? We're going to look at the running the great race. It's becoming all things to all people, so that some might be saved. Well, anyway, but for now, this question came out of this, and that's, how do we know what God's ways are, and how do we know if what we do is pleasing God? And what came from that really more than anything was a discussion about the line we draw between where one is actually having lustful issues, where one is actually having sinful issues with sexual immorality. Where's the line between, I don't even know how it was worded, art and pornography? Where's the line between these things? And first of all, if you're looking for the line, you're probably way too close to it, and that's probably problematic. again, you're trying to look for splitting hairs, and Jesus is concerned about the condition of the heart. The laws are written on the heart. We live in such a way that we're not walking right up to the line, because that's not stupid. Now, we also don't tell everybody else they have to stay away from the line, because that's legalism. But if you're looking for right up to the line where you can go, maybe you have the wrong approach. But this question, and that's where this kind of came from, how do we know what is God's ways when he says this thing is inappropriate? Say, for example, premarital sex. Well, if we're not supposed to have sex outside of marriage, where's the line where this is okay? Or how do we know if we're doing all right? And how do we know what we want to do? I'll tell you the easiest way to discover that. Read your Bible. Pray. Be in community with other believers. Talk through these things. As you get this whole overarching picture of God's ways, you start to understand God's mind and God's heart. And as you're reasoning with God, you're being transformed into the image of Christ. And pretty soon your eyes are transformed and your ears are transformed. And over time, you just kind of go, well, yeah, this of course is God's way. I don't have to worry about if I'm in it or if I'm not, or if I'm pleasing God or if I'm not. Because God constantly says, these are my commands. If you haven't gone through the Commands of Christ study at Redeeming Life, let's do it. Let us know. Let Pastor Brett know. Let Pastor Derek know. Talk to us. Talk to me. We'll sit down and we'll just say, look, the cool thing about that study is here's the general commands that Jesus gives. We're supposed to teach all that he commanded as part of the Great Commission, and we have a snippet of those. And so we look at, here's the command. Jesus says, be baptized. Here's a story or an account of someone who followed. Here's a command. Here's a story or an account of somebody who followed. And this is good. Thank you, Derek. You didn't give me your name, and you don't even know if you wanted me to out you, but I know this is you because we just talked about this. Next week, I'm going to go back to this, a little bit of this. Next week, we're going to be talking about running the good race at the end of chapter 9. It says, do you not know that that in a race all the runners run, but only one receives the prize? So run that you may obtain it. Every athlete exercises self-control in all things. They do it to receive a perishable wreath. He's talking about like Olympians, and the Winter Olympics are going to start. It's kind of like that picture. We should give out wreaths. That's a lot cheaper than gold medals. But anyway, but we run for what is imperishable. So do not run aimlessly, and do not box as one beating the air. But I discipline my body and keep it under control, lest after preaching to others I myself might be disqualified. And the comment, and I think he gets it from Piper, we were talking about it, is the question is not what keeps me from running, what causes me to stumble in my run. The question is what helps me to run the race. I think that's so helpful. And so how do we know we're doing this? Is it helping you to run? Thank you, Pastor Derek. Is it helping you to please God? You can sense it as you read, as you spend time with God, as you understand him. Imagine if you never spent any time with your wife or your girlfriend or your husband, or you never spend any time with that person. How would you know what they like and what pleases them? You spend time with God, and you hear from his word, and you get around his family and his people, and you just know. And so I think that's the best answer. How do we know? Spend time hearing from him. And then when he says, hey, here's something, do it and trust him and let that grow you and conform you to his image. How are we doing on time? All right, cool. We got a couple heavy questions here. I think I'm going to take just a little breather for you and answer this why do you stay in Salt Lake question. I don't know if that was intended to be snarky. I know, I kind of know who's asking and what that was about, but it was in regard to some of this stuff and why we're trying this. And so this is an experiment, right? I don't know how this is going to go. I don't know if we're going to text this number and it's going to be helpful, and I don't know. We're just trying stuff. We want to reach this community, Utah, because God has called us to Salt Lake to see the city redeemed by the power of the gospel. And so we're trying stuff. Why do we try this video thing? Why are we desperately trying to connect with people? I had somebody else reach out to me and say, hey, I'm thinking about trying to do some one-on-one conversations. Just open it up. If you want to talk theology or your faith, let's get together in a coffee shop. If you're interested in that, I think this guy could put you two in touch, and you could sit down and talk it out, do whatever. The things we're doing, people go, if you did that where I live, Bible Belt areas or other areas, man, it'd be crazy. It'd be amazing. Where I live, people just preach on Sunday. Why don't you just do that? Why are you doing all this leadership development, indigenous leadership training, and You know, you have a doctorate, for crying out loud. Why don't you go where they do actually have a Lifeway in the state? We don't have a Lifeway store here. We don't have. My wife was looking at this little app thing where pastors can go to like a little retreat home or a, I don't know, a cabin, you know, or something, just to get away. We don't make a lot of money. Pastors usually don't, at least where I'm from. And so we're like, hey, that's pretty cool. And you'll pull up the app and you look at all the. It's like a Airbnb for pastors or something. And so you pull it up, and are there any in Utah? No, there's not. You see movie screenings for the Christian movies coming out. Are there any in Utah? Usually no. You see concerts that don't come to Utah. So people go, gosh, if you were doing what you were doing and you had these Christians around you, wouldn't that be better? Dr. Brian, this would be so great. Come to this thing. Come work at our church. Come do this. And, you know, I don't do most of the things that I do very well anyway. So I'm like, I don't know. But I'm here because I'm called to be here. I'm here because who else is going to preach the gospel to a state that doesn't know Jesus? If all these things aren't here, it's because there's not a market for those sorts of things, which means there's not Christians here. I'm here because I think there's a statistic that like 54 people in Utah or something like that die every day. And 53 of them don't have a relationship, as far as I understand it from what the Bible says, with Jesus. That breaks my heart. Why am I here? Because there's a biblical illiteracy here. Why am I here? Because there are not people trying to do this with you, not people sitting in groups. I was talking with a guy, and I think we were talking about the West Valley area or somewhere, and we said, look, there's 140,000 people in this particular area. We've looked at all the evangelical, all the Christian churches that hold to the Trinity, hold to the Jesus of the Bible, fit with Orthodox Christianity, and we've discovered there's about 1,500 seats with all the services they offer and everything for the people, and there might be 2,000 Christians there. So we don't even have enough seats for them, and there's still 138,000 people who aren't worshiping the biblical Jesus at all. How are they going to hear if someone doesn't go preach? I'm here to do that. And then Pastor Brett just chimed in, and I love it. Why not be in Utah? Why not be in an unreached people group? I mean, you know, people travel all over the world to go on mission trips. And we talk to them, and, you know, they go to places where there's, you know, 10%, 15%, 20% of the population confesses faith in the Jesus of the Bible. They believe he is who he says he is, the Son of God, not a created being, not our brother exactly like we are, but God, our Creator, our King in the Trinity, right? And they go to those places where there's that kind of a percentage of Christians, and they get really excited about that. And I say, why don't you come to Utah? In fact, if you're going to do that, why don't you come over to the west side where we're at, where there are not a lot of mission things going on. You know, it takes a lot of hard work. I'm so thankful for the people at Redeeming Life. They've either lived here and they stay here for the sake of the gospel. It'd be so easy to go, you know, I'm going to pack up and go. They stay here for the sake of the gospel, so that maybe someone around them, as it says in Acts, you know, might feel their way to the Lord and get saved. We've got people that have moved over here. I just had a party this weekend, like a Super Bowl party at one of these houses with a couple that said, we're going to go live missionally over there. We have people like Pastor Bray, he's raising his income to be here, because how are we going to do this? How are we going to see people saved and see people in the family, and how are we going to proclaim faithfully the gospel of Jesus Christ? How are we going to fulfill the Great Commission if we are so quick to say, I'm out of here because there's not a Lifeway store anymore. I'm out of here because there's only a few churches. I'm out of here because it doesn't feel good to be the only one in my workplace who's a Christian. I'm gone. I can't live like that. I couldn't do it. I want to run the good race. I want to live the very best I can to please the Lord. I have texts coming in like crazy. I'm going to take a minute. Sorry, I got a little bit passionate. I'm sorry. Romans 10, 14, and 15. Thank you, Ed. Go check. How is anybody going to call them? And how are they going to call out to Christ if there's nobody to preach, if they've not believed, if they've not heard? Beautiful are the feet who proclaim the gospel. Right? So, yeah, I'm a little passionate about that. And some of you guys know I'm really passionate. The other thing I'm passionate about is we have got to train more people who are right here, who live here, who aren't so quick to say, I'm out of here, to proclaim the gospel. I am thankful for all of the laborers who've come. I love that the answer to Luke 10:2, but I really think that the answer to Luke 10:2, pray for the Lord of the harvest that He'll send laborers, actually is coming from them because Jesus is sending them in that moment. So it's us, like, Lord, send us to anyone in the state who needs to hear. Send us to plant more churches. Send us to proclaim. Right? It's just nuts. It's just nuts. And then I got this too. I love this. Man, I love doing ministry and team. I got the other pastors like, hey, what about this? What about that? If you want to come out and you want to serve with us, man, do it. Give me a call. You can call me on my cell. You can text me this. I'll reach out to you. Reach out to me. Find us on Facebook. If you want to come out and be an intern with us, if you want to come out and learn and grow and serve with us, and if you want to be challenged and if you want to be pushed, man, come talk to me. Let's do it. We will find a place for you. We will figure it out. But here's the deal. You got to raise all your own support, and it's going to be hard, and hopefully you won't be crushed under the weight of it. I think about this missionary, and for the life of me, I want to say it's Studd. Might not have been C.T. Studd, who was going to get married, and he told his bride to be, her father, I can't promise anything great. We might even die, but I can give her a life that's worthy of living the kingdom. That's a terrible paraphrase and not even the full quote, but that's what we do out here. So I talk to people all the time. Yeah, I want to be a missionary in Russia or this other country. Great. Why don't you come practice right here where you don't have to learn a different language. You're not going to be eating bugs. You're not exchanging money. You could get a job. You're probably a citizen of the country, and more importantly, you're a citizen of the kingdom. So why don't you practice every single day right where you are in the harvest all the time, 24/7. You wake up, opportunities are everywhere. You go to sleep, the next day you wake up, there's going to be opportunities everywhere. Come to Utah, preach the gospel, make a difference with your life that's eternal. Man, I'm telling you, how could you not want to be in Utah? How could you not want to live for the King of Kings in a place like this? Man, if you can come here, come. You want to connect with us, come. You live in the valley, you want to serve on a mission in a place that's not so easy. Come on over. Rose Park, Fair Park, North Salt Lake, Glendale, Woods Cross. It's not easy. It's not easy. Come join us. I cannot promise you that you will not be tired, exhausted, and burned out, but I can promise you that you will be living for something bigger than yourself. Phew, sorry. Woo. Got a little amped up there. It's meaningful. It's important. So when people say, why do you stay in Salt Lake? That's why. And, it's a beautiful place most of the time. Where else would I want to go? All right, we got that one covered. Let's hit these other ones before I run out of time. Whoa. Sorry, I got just super amped up. I appreciate everybody who serves as a missionary. I appreciate all of our partners who keep us in the field because it's hard. Getting a self-sustaining church going and seeing this, it's hard work. We have partners. I sent thank yous out, and hopefully they're hitting your mailboxes to the churches that partner with us. We sent individuals who partner with us, and we have, from Mississippi and Iowa and Nebraska and Wisconsin and Minnesota and Florida and Georgia, and I am unbelievably thankful that you keep us doing this work because it's hard work. Financially, you support us with prayers. You've got our back, and by doing that, I was in the Army, so I always use the people who make grenades, the people who throw grenades. Guy who throws grenades can't throw grenades if people aren't making grenades, so thank you for being in the factory making the grenades. Yeah, we're out here on the front line. Come join us. Come see what's going on. Keep making grenades. Keep supporting us. If you're a church who wants to support us, man, reach out to me. If you're an individual who goes, I want to join that, but I can't leave where I'm at, let me know. I have people that make this so possible. Pastor Brett is a missionary out here on the support of other people. Our church, we're doing a great job, but we have support from other people. It is because of Christians all over the place that we're still doing the work. And then someone just texted, and I love it. I can't come to Utah, but I can cheer for the Utes. And I say, that's right. Let's do it. Football team's great, but every time you see those teams out in the West, say a prayer for us, especially if you see anything University of Utah, especially BYU. If Mitt Romney runs for anything again, I always used to say, anytime you see that guy on the news, just remember Utah and pray. Anytime you see anything about Utah, say a prayer. This is a tough place. Back to this. Sorry. Whoa. This is what my staff guys, we get around this. We get all fired up like this all the time. Let's hit this testing one. I think we can do kind of quick. What does testing mean in Romans 12:2. Turn with me to Romans 12:2. This comes up a little bit in James. It's a slightly different. I'm getting there slowly but surely. I'm almost there. Can you see what pages I'm on? Probably. How embarrassing. That took me forever. Okay, this came up, and I have it's on my phone. I have a Greek New Testament on my phone, and we looked, and I'm not super good with that, so I was kind of working in it. But I'll say this: I kind of answered this, and then I thought we'd just talk about it here because it was somewhat generated via text anyway. So it says, first of all, in context, which is important, it says, Paul says, "I appeal to you, therefore," and he's talking about all the theology that he's just laid out in Romans 1 through 11, and then this is the turning point where now it's going to come to practice, or the lab. It says, "I appeal to you, therefore, brothers, by the mercy of God, to present your bodies as a living sacrifice." I mean, run the good race. Give everything you've got to God. Go all in. Don't die, because you're alive for Him. You died to self, right? You're a living sacrifice. Those two words don't even go well together. As a living sacrifice, you live for Christ. Holy and acceptable to God, which is your spiritual worship. Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind. Now that, so it's an explanation of the renewal of your mind, or the transformation and the renewal of your mind, that by testing you may discern what is the will of God, what is good, and what is acceptable, and what is perfect. And there's a couple approaches to this. I have not done a lot of the lexical work. I haven't looked at this too heavily. But the testing is not like some, here's my formula, and this will help me. But because your mind is being renewed, and because your life is being transformed, you have the ability to kind of test like a silversmith would test, or test to determine, or maybe even judge, so that by judging or ascertaining or understanding, you can discern now. You have the ability now, because you've been transformed and your mind's been transformed, to know what is good and what is acceptable. And what that actually, that has a lot to do with the other question now that I think about it. Because of your transformation, because you understand the will of God, as you look at things, you now have enough wisdom from God, which is where all wisdom and knowledge comes from, to say this is good, that's not good. Hey, this pleases God, that doesn't please God. Not because you just go, I think it's this, thus says the Lord, but because you have so much of His words in you, and so much of His mind is transformed to your mind. You're not just making it up. You're not making a judgment out of ignorance. You're making a judgment out of God's wisdom, that you might test these things because you've been transformed. I hope that answers that question. It's interesting how those two go together. I probably should have dealt with them together that way. You see that in James too, like the testing produces steadfastness, this trial. We do see that God does test us in this way, and He also refines us by fire, and the testing of that is that the impurities are gone. We have these different things, and also that we are even called. People say, don't ever judge, don't ever test. We're called to test. By the measure we test or judge, we will also be judged, but to do it with wisdom and rightness and the appropriate critical thinking skills to say, look, this is what God says. This is inside the bounds and outside the bounds. Pleases God, doesn't please God. Biblical, unbiblical, heretical. We have that ability to process this, and this is what this is saying. Because of your transformed mind, because of your life given over to God, you are able to do such a thing. I have a statement which might be helpful. This is good. It says, as God transforms your mind, your discernment grows right, and you grow in the ability to test and decide the rightness of your actions and decisions. Yes, Ed, spot on. That is exactly it. Plus a little bit of experience, right? As you're following this, and as you're in a community, right? Other people, and they're going, wait a second. And you're watching the Holy Spirit work in people. There's this transformation that makes that possible, and it's only through God that even happens. But you're not just going to randomly, magically come to it. It's going to be through the working in the text, the working in the community, the prayers, the opening yourself up to submitting to God, hearing from Him, following Him. That's good. I think that's a helpful question. These are kind of all over the place, but I hope you're getting something from it. I hope this is fruitful and helpful. Why? Oh, my goodness. Here we go. I know some of you are watching this right now and you're just cringing. The question is, why would God allow a pastor to hurt someone? Right up front, I know when you hear a question like that, it comes from somebody who's been hurt. It comes from somebody who struggles. And I have a book. Let's see here. It's over in the counseling section. Okay, I do not know very much about this dude's theology. His writing style is really weird. Just because I have the book, I have another one by the same guy that has to do with submission and things. But this book actually is a really good conversation starter. It's a good discussion piece. It's thought-provoking. It's called Exquisite Agony, Healing for Christians Who Have Been Hurt by Other Christians by Gene Edwards. Again, I don't know much about the guy. I don't know much about any of that, but I know this book has been helpful in just framing some thoughts. There's not a lot of books that I've seen that are about healing for Christians who've been hurt by other Christians. So it looks like that. It might have a different update. I think it used to be called Crucified by Christians, but there's a really fascinating premise in there and about what God is doing as you're being crucified and what the purpose of crucifixion is in many ways is to kill something and to work out something. And so before I get into the big issue of providence and sovereign behaviors and grace and meticulous sovereignty, things of those natures, that sounds terrible. Before I get into all that, sorry, my head's just spinning around. This is the biggest question I have to ask first. We ask, why would God let a pastor, one of his servants, hurt someone? The bigger question is, why would God let us hurt his son? Right, that's what we've done. Why would God allow us to put the sin that we've committed on his son and that would kill him? Why would God allow Jesus to die, take the punishment for our sin on himself? Why would God allow such a thing? Right? So we're concerned about a pastor hurting someone, and at the same time, this someone has hurt, this someone and the pastor have hurt Christ. We've, in some ways, because of our sin, have hurt Christ. Why would God allow such a thing? Okay, that's the first question. The second piece that we probably need to look at in that is, why would we assume that our pastors would be perfect? They serve Christ like we all serve Christ. They lead. They say, follow me as I follow Christ. Come in the same places. Our pastors are not mysterious. They're not magicians. They're not perfect. They're not Jesus. I'm not Jesus. I have Jesus living in me, and I want to be his hands, his feet, his incarnation. But I am certainly a flawed human being, just like all of us. And so we have to ask, what would cause a pastor suddenly to have no issues? And then also, do we believe that God is going to withhold the ills of the world when he wouldn't even withhold that being placed on his son? All of this is for a purpose. All of this is to teach and to move. And you see that in this Crucified by Exquisite Agony. You see that this is bringing about something for a purpose, for his good, that we might not understand on this side of eternity. And while it's painful, it's doing something. It's not meaningless. Now, it's terrible, which is why a plurality of elders is helpful, why good character before we ever put somebody in the pastorate is helpful. Why we were talking today on staff about like ordination with an individuals on our staff who want to be ordained, and there's this huge issue of calling, absolutely, huge issue of competency and what are they capable of doing, and a huge issue of character. We put accountability around the table. We're constantly trying to be accountable, and we're calling each other out. When you get pastors in an environment where there's no accountability, no calling, and no issues there, it's a problem. And it causes people to get hurt. And pastors have to be so cautious of that. And they will be held to a higher account. And let's see, where Hebrews 13, I think. We have a section on teachers. You're going to be held to that standard. But I think I'm going to go there real fast. Hopefully I'm faster than the text that'll come in and tell me it's there. I think it's Hebrews 13. Turn with me. It's like Hebrews 13:17. Is that? Yeah. Okay, here it is. So Hebrews 13:17 says, obey your leaders. And you're like, whoa, hold on a second. I thought they hurt people. Listen, obey your leaders and submit to them, for they are keeping watch over your souls as those who will have to give an account. And the encouragement is let them do this with joy and not with groaning, for that would be of no advantage to you. So that the point of the text here in Hebrews is, look, serve them. They care for you. We've become a society that we say, look, I just want an organizational guy who will put together a social thing for me and not be worried about my soul. I take this verse extremely seriously, and I press this on the guys at Redeeming Life. Like, you're responsible for the souls of these people, and you will stand before God, and God will say, what did you do with the souls that I died for? You say, oh, I hurt them. I cannot imagine that's going to go well for this pastor at all. And so it's not going to be forgotten. It might be forgiven if this pastor finds an issue to repent and seek forgiveness and all that, but it's not that God will not deal with it. It just might not be that he's dealing with it in your timing. Why would God allow that? He doesn't allow that. He's going to have them hold a special audience with God and give an account for the souls of the people they're hurting. Jesus is so hard on the Pharisees. You blind guides. You're leading people into the wrong things, and there's a condemnation that happens, and it will happen to the pastors. And unfortunately, in our world today, this happens so much that not just lots of people hurt people. Bosses, employers, mentors, guides, big brothers, big sisters, all people hurt people. It's the consequences of a fallen, broken world that needs Jesus. But these pastors who are called to be under shepherds, when they mistreat the bride of Christ, his church, right, when they mistreat the flock, they will have to give an account for that. Rest assured, that's what the word says. It is true. And at the same time, it's saying submit to them. Well, how do we know if we're submitting to them and they're hurtful? There are false prophets and there are bad shepherds out there. And if they're not serving as an under shepherd of Jesus, themselves submitted to Christ and then leading, maybe they're not a pastor at all. Maybe there should be something worth taking a look at. I'm going to take a look at the comments that are coming in. Man, I love you guys for helping me out in this. Whoa. Man, so, I appreciate that you guys are chiming in with this feedback. It says, Christ's suffering on the cross in payment for our sin and God's forgiveness of sin is a model of what we are called to do when wronged, difficult as that sometimes is. Sorry, that's just my bad reading. More often, though, we are the ones that are wrong and hurt and we're injured. That's not you, it's me. More often, though, we are wrong in our case and hurt is from injured pride. And so there is the possibility that we have something to do with that. God cares about the someone. And if the someone is you, he cares tremendously about you. If it's someone else, he cares about the someone more than you do. God cares about his people. God is concerned. That's why these pastors, myself, our staff, we're going to have to give an account for how we're doing this, so we better get it right. And do we get it right every time? No. Have I messed up? Yes. And I joke that I teach heresy, and when I figure out what it is, I'll stop teaching it. I want to be submitted to the Lord. I joke that, I sin, but I want to be repentant, but it's serious. I joke, hey, I've probably messed up, but I know I've said things that have hurt people. Sometimes I'm socially awkward and aloof, or sometimes my hard-charging attitude comes in and, I know that there are times when I do that. I hope it's not so egregious that we can't walk in life together and there can't be forgiveness. But man, I take that seriously. I do not want to hurt God's people. But that's not the job of an under-shepherd. Okay, so I think I've got through all the questions that I've had come in. There's 1 minute left, so I probably don't have any time to deal with your questions as they're coming in. But if you want to text stuff in throughout the week, the number is 385-368-6665. I'll try to deal with it here. If you're watching after the recording and it's not live anymore, that's a good course of action. I want to remind you, come join us at Redeeming Life. We meet at 11 a.m. Find our website at redeeminglifeutah.org. Find us on Facebook. We want to connect with you, and if you're passionate about sharing and advancing the gospel of Jesus Christ and you're ready, come to Utah. If you're in Utah, come to Rose Park. If you're in Rose Park, come find us. Get connected. If you're with us and you're like, wait a minute, I should live like a missionary, Pastor Brett is just itching to talk to you, and so am I. So let's get out there. Let's share the gospel. Let's work through this. Let's live faithfully, and I'm going to be talking about it this Sunday. Let's run the good race. Hey, you guys are a blessing. I love all the comments that have come in. I love all the help. This is so much better for me. I don't know if it is for you, but I hope so. I hope it's fruitful. You guys have been a blessing to me tonight. I hope you guys can say likewise. So thank you. I'll see you next Tuesday, if not before. Go out there, share the gospel. Thanks.